Welcome to my channel. The forest was silent, but it wasn't the silence of peace. It was the silence that comes when something unseen is watching. I had wandered too far from the main trail, breathing in the cold, sweet air of an alien world that felt both beautiful and dangerous. Strange blue leaves whispered overhead, and soft lights flickered between the trees like eyes. That was when I saw them, figures moving without sound, surrounding me in a perfect circle. Their silhouettes were graceful, fierce, and undeniably feminine. My heart pounded, not from fear alone, but from something I couldn't explain. They stepped closer, their eyes glowing softly in the half-light. They weren't like any species I had seen before. Each wore woven bands across their arms, shimmering with faint patterns, and their expressions carried both power and curiosity. I felt my breath catch when one of them raised her hand, not in threat, but in invitation. I didn't know if they were warriors, hunters, or something else entirely. All I knew was that I was not alone anymore. They brought me to their hidden village deep in the forest. The air there was warm, perfumed with flowers that seemed to bloom only in moonlight. The tribe moved like wind through the leaves, silent, coordinated, and mesmerizing. Every gaze lingered on me like I was something they had been waiting for. The leader, with a steady gaze and a voice soft as a whisper, asked no questions. She simply stepped closer, and I felt the weight of their world pressing in around me. I had never felt so exposed, or so strangely safe. The nights there felt longer than any I had known. The tribe surrounded me, not as captors but as if they were studying every heartbeat I gave away. Their rituals were strange, light dances beneath the stars, songs carried through the branches, touches that were gentle yet filled with unspoken meaning. It wasn't just mystery anymore. Something electric filled the air. They treated me like a secret they had been guarding, waiting for the right moment to reveal. Tension grew like vines twisting around a tree trunk. Their leader approached again, this time with the moonlight wrapping her like silver silk. She lifted her hand to my chest, resting it over my racing heartbeat, and the rest of the tribe watched with burning eyes that told a story without words. It wasn't about power anymore. It was about choice. It was about the quiet pull between strangers who shouldn't have met but did. What happened next was not loud. It wasn't a fight or a battle. It was a silent storm between souls that collided in the dark, drawn by something neither of us fully understood. They had found me lost in their forest, but it was I who was now lost in their world. Their presence surrounded me, not with chains but with a strange, consuming pull that blurred the line between danger and desire. My heart had already chosen long before my mind could catch up. As the last night in their forest drew close, I realized I had walked into something far deeper than I expected. They were not just a tribe. They were a story that would change everything I thought I knew about the stars. If you want to hear what happened when I finally faced their leader beneath the alien moon, make sure you subscribe and stay with me for the next part of this journey. The tribe's village came alive under the pale silver glow of the alien moon, and the longer I stayed among them, the more I began to sense the rhythm of their world. It wasn't a place built with walls or stone, but with living trees shaped into shelters, their branches braided together like fingers locked in quiet trust. Their fires burned with a soft violet flame, casting strange shadows that danced across their faces, turning them into creatures of myth and mystery. The air smelled of honey and crushed petals, sweet but sharp, wrapping around me with a pull I could neither resist nor fully understand. They moved around me in silence, a circle of gazes that spoke louder than words. Each glance carried meaning, curiosity, and something deeper, a claim that hadn't yet been spoken aloud. The leader stood at the center of them, her presence both commanding and calm, like the quiet before a storm. Her hair shimmered like threads of moonlight, her skin carrying a faint silver glow that made her look almost unreal. She walked toward me slowly, every step deliberate, her tribe parting to let her through. Her eyes locked onto mine, and in that moment, the forest around us faded. She didn't need language to speak. Her expression told me everything. I wasn't a prisoner. I was something else entirely, something chosen. The others followed her lead, surrounding me in a way that felt less like a threat and more like a ritual. I could feel their energy pressing against mine, soft but inescapable. They led me deeper into the heart of their village, to a clearing where the trees arched into a natural dome, their leaves pulsing with a faint bioluminescent glow. The floor was soft underfoot, covered with a thick layer of moss that carried a warmth of its own, almost as if the ground itself recognized me. They formed a circle around me again, their movements graceful, their faces lit with a mixture of reverence and hunger for something unknown. A low hum rose from their throats, a sound that vibrated in the air and through my chest. It wasn't music I could recognize, but it pulled me in like a tide. It felt old, older than anything human, like a song the stars themselves might have remembered. One of them, with copper hair flowing down her back, reached out first. Her fingers brushed against my wrist, light as a feather, but it sent a ripple through my entire body. Others followed, each touch slow, deliberate, as if learning the shape of me. The leader didn't move yet. She stood still, watching, measuring my reactions with those piercing eyes. I could tell this was more than curiosity, it was some kind of initiation. I was being introduced to their world, their way, their bond. The weight of their attention was overwhelming, but not in a way that pushed me away. Pulled me closer like gravity. As their hum grew louder, the forest itself seemed to respond. The branches above shivered even though there was no wind, and the glowing flowers brightened as if feeding on the energy between us. The leader finally stepped forward, her hand finding its place over my heart, pressing gently against the frantic rhythm beneath my ribs. No words, no explanation, just silence thick enough to breathe. Her gaze didn't waver, and neither did mine. I could feel the shift happening, something larger than me or them taking root in the night air. I didn't know what I had stepped into when they found me in the forest, but now, standing inside their circle, I realized it wasn't just my story anymore. It was theirs too. The hum slowly faded into silence, leaving only the sound of my heartbeat echoing in the clearing. They lowered their hands but didn't step away, surrounding me like a living wall. I understood now that whatever came next would not be accidental. It was written in the way they looked at me, in the way the forest seemed to hold its breath, in the warmth of their hands that still lingered against my skin. I was no longer an outsider in their eyes. I was part of something ancient, something I couldn't yet name, but it had already claimed me. The night deepened, and the forest grew quiet, holding its breath like it was listening. The village around me no longer felt like a place hidden in the wild. It felt alive, as if it had been waiting for this exact moment to unfold. The soft violet flames burned brighter than before, sending their warm glow through the branches and illuminating faces that seemed carved from the shadows themselves. Each of the women in that tribe moved with the same measured grace, like they were following a rhythm only they could hear. It was in their eyes that the mystery lived, quiet but powerful, a pull that reached straight past reason and sank into something older, something human and instinctive. Their gazes were not simple stares. They held stories, unspoken vows, and a promise of something I couldn't yet name. The leader stood closest to me, her expression still unreadable, but in her stillness was control, not coldness. She didn't speak, but somehow I knew she was waiting, not for permission, but for the right moment. Around her, the others began to move in slow, deliberate patterns, circling me as though performing a ritual they had done 1,000 times before. Their bare feet made no sound against the moss, but I could feel the vibration of their steps in the earth beneath me. The air grew warmer, thicker, wrapping around me like silk. My breathing became louder in my own ears, every beat of my heart echoing inside that living dome of glowing leaves. Strange symbols began to appear around the circle, etched into the ground by glowing lines of light that seemed to rise from beneath the moss itself. They weren't writing, not in the way I knew, but they carried weight like language that didn't need to be spoken to be understood. Their leader raised her hands slowly, palms open toward the stars peeking through the canopy. The other women mirrored her, and their voices joined in a low chant, a haunting melody that filled every corner of the forest. The sound wasn't just heard, it was felt, deep in the bones. It moved through the ground, through the trees, and through me, I realized in that moment that I wasn't just standing inside a tribe's camp. I was inside something sacred. Their chants were calling something, or maybe awakening it. A current ran through the air, making the glowing flowers sway as if moved by a wind that didn't exist. One by one, the women stepped forward, stopping just short of touching me, their breaths brushing against my skin like warm whispers. Their eyes held a heat that wasn't violent, but it was relentless. They looked at me not as prey, but as if I had been chosen by something far older than all of us. I could feel their energy reaching for me without laying a hand on me, wrapping me in something that felt both dangerous and safe all at once. The leader lowered her arms and approached me, the chanting fading into a soft hum. Her steps were so silent they felt like part of the forest itself. When she reached me, she tilted her head slightly, her eyes searching mine with a quiet intensity that made everything else disappear. She placed her hand over the glowing symbols on the ground, and the light flared like a heartbeat. She didn't ask me to speak. She didn't need words. It was as though she could see every flicker of confusion, every breath of fear, and every pulse of curiosity inside me. Then she pressed her palm gently against my chest again, and I felt a warmth spread through me like fire that didn't burn. Around us, the other women began to move closer, not as hunters but as if drawn by something pulling us together. The hum grew louder, the ground seemed to pulse beneath my feet, and the lights in the canopy above shimmered like falling stars. My senses blurred at the edges. The air smelled of crushed petals and earth after rain, sweet and sharp. The world I had known felt distant, fading behind this strange, luminous moment. I had never been part of anything like this. It was a mystery wrapped in silence, but its meaning was written in their eyes. They hadn't just captured me. They had drawn me into something that existed long before I ever set foot in their forest. Their leader leaned in just close enough for her breath to touch my skin, and the silence between us grew heavy. She whispered something soft in her own language, the syllables curling through the air like smoke. I didn't understand the words, but I understood the weight of them. Whatever this was, it wasn't ending soon. This night was just the beginning of something deeper, something the forest itself seemed to be waiting to witness. And as their shadows closed in like warm light, I knew I had crossed a line I could never uncross. The violet fires burned lower as the night wrapped itself around the forest, drawing everything into a hush so complete it felt like even the stars were watching. The air had grown heavy with a strange heat, not from the flames, but from the weight of so many eyes locked on me. The women of the tribe circled closer, their movements slow, fluid, and soundless, like dancers in a performance older than language. Each step they took seemed to make the ground itself respond, the moss beneath my feet pulsing faintly like a living heart. The leader stood only a breath away, the faint shimmer of her skin glowing like liquid silver under the light. Her presence pressed against me without touch, her eyes holding mine with quiet power. It wasn't the look of someone asking. It was the look of someone who already knew the answer. The chanting began again, low and rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat shared among them all. It wasn't loud, but it filled the entire space, echoing through the trees and under my skin. The glowing symbols on the ground flared softly, swirling outward like ripples in water, and the forest seemed to lean closer. I could feel my own heartbeat syncing with the rhythm they set, as if my body had become part of their ritual. One by one, the women around me began to raise their hands, their fingers tracing invisible shapes in the air, and those shapes left behind faint trails of light. It felt like being caught inside a storm made of silence and breath, and though every part of me screamed to understand what was happening, another part didn't want to resist. The mystery had already wrapped its hands around me. The leader lifted her arm slowly and placed her palm against my chest again, right over my heartbeat. This time, the touch wasn't soft. It was deliberate, firm, grounding. Her eyes didn't blink. The humming of the tribe shifted tone, deepening, growing more intense, and the glowing patterns beneath us burst brighter. It was as if the ground itself was responding to that single touch. I could feel warmth radiating through my chest, spilling through my veins like fire spreading through dry wood. It wasn't pain, but it was too much to ignore. I sucked in a breath as the air between us thickened, alive with something neither human nor alien but somewhere in between. The others stepped closer, surrounding us in a tight circle. They didn't speak, but their faces carried a shared emotion, a blend of hunger, claim, and something older, something that made my skin prickle. One reached out and touched my arm lightly. Another brushed their fingers against my shoulder, their touch feather-soft but carrying a weight that rooted me where I stood. None of them had to say anything. They all moved like they had done this 1,000 times, like every motion was carved into their bones. It wasn't chaos. It was ritual. I was standing in the center of something sacred and unshakable. Above us, the canopy of glowing leaves flickered like 1,000 silent stars. The wind didn't move, yet the light shifted as if it were breathing with us. The leader finally leaned in close enough that I could feel the heat of her breath against my ear. She whispered in her language again, words soft and careful. Their meaning carried more in their rhythm than their sound. The moment hung between us, thick with tension, and I understood without understanding. This was not a question. This was a claiming, not of ownership but of connection, something ancient that lived in their world long before mine ever touched it. Their hands didn't hold me down, but their presence anchored me in a way chains never could. Every motion, every hum, every flicker of light was part of a storm slowly closing around me, but it wasn't frightening anymore. It was strange, magnetic, impossible to escape. Not because I was trapped, but because a part of me didn't want to run. The leader's hand slid from my chest to the center of my palm, and when her skin touched mine fully, a shock of warmth ran through me like a pulse. The forest answered. The fires flared higher, the symbols on the ground spun like flowing water, and the tribe's humming grew deep enough to feel in the bones. The air trembled as if it had its own heartbeat. I looked at each of them, their faces bathed in soft alien light, their eyes sharp and burning with the same shared pull. This wasn't chance. This wasn't a mistake. I had walked into their forest by accident, but I was standing here by something far greater. The leader's fingers intertwined with mine, and a stillness fell, as if the night itself bowed. It was a moment between fear and surrender, between the world I had known and the one waiting just beyond the edge of reason. And for the first time, I stopped fighting the pull. I let it take me. The air in the forest seemed to shift when the leader's fingers fully laced with mine, like the moment right before a storm breaks. The violet fire burned steady, but the light felt different now. Deeper, more alive, reflecting in the eyes of every woman surrounding me. The circle was smaller, closer, their breaths warm against the cool air. It wasn't the silence of strangers anymore. It was the silence of something decided. The hum they had built through the night slowed into something softer, almost like a lullaby, but there was power behind it, coiled like heat beneath still water. Every movement they made was precise, as though each gesture carried centuries of meaning. I was no longer just standing in their ritual. I had become the center of it. The leader drew closer until the warmth of her body pressed just shy of mine, her eyes searching mine like she could see every thought that passed behind them. Her palm rested firmly against my chest, feeling the quick rhythm beneath. For the first time, her expression softened, not as a queen commanding a ritual, but as someone seeing another person for what they truly were. The glowing symbols beneath our feet responded, swirling into new patterns I didn't recognize, the light shifting to a warmer hue, as if the forest itself understood that something had changed. The other women stepped back just slightly, not leaving but giving space. Their eyes never wavered. They were watching something that belonged to all of them but was happening between just two. The chant faded into whispers, breaths blending with the rustling of the glowing leaves overhead. She raised her free hand slowly, her fingers trailing just above my jawline but never touching, as if testing whether this moment was real. It was an unspoken language, every tilt of her head, every breath drawn slowly between us. The weight of the night pressed down, not as a threat but as something ancient, something binding. When her fingers finally touched my skin, it wasn't a command. It was a claim written in warmth and silence, a promise whispered without words. The other women lowered their heads slightly, not in submission but in acknowledgement. This was the moment they had been waiting for. The forest answered to it. A faint pulse ran through the ground, rising up through my feet and spreading through my body like a tide. It wasn't pain or fear. It was overwhelming, like standing too close to something vast and powerful. The leader stepped even closer, the silver glow of her skin almost brushing mine, and I felt her heartbeat echo through the air between us. The soft hum returned, layered and low, the voices of the tribe carrying a rhythm that wrapped around us like a spell. Their steps matched the beat, their eyes half closed as if they were slipping into the same current that had caught me. One by one, the other women approached, not to break the moment but to weave themselves into it. A hand brushed my shoulder, another grazed my forearm, a third traced the edge of my palm. Each touch was soft, reverent, as if every part of me was being read like a story they had always known but never touched. I wasn't just a stranger in their forest anymore. I was a piece of their ritual, a thread in something larger. Their leader's gaze held mine steady, never looking away, anchoring me in the middle of the rising current. The light above us grew stronger, warm gold mixing with the deep violet of the fires. It spilled over their faces, catching every shimmer on their skin, making the moment feel almost suspended outside of time. My pulse raced, not from fear, but from the weight of being seen so completely. Their ritual wasn't about chains or cages. It was about connection, about binding something unseen into something that could never quite be undone. It wasn't loud, it wasn't violent, but it was overwhelming in its quiet certainty. They had found me in the dark, and now they were pulling me into their world with every breath, every touch, every look. The leader tilted her forehead toward mine, just enough that I could feel the warmth of her breath against my skin, and the forest grew completely silent. Not a leaf moved, not a flame crackled. It was as if everything waited for this single, breathless moment. My heart beat once, twice, then matched hers. And in that stillness, I understood something I couldn't put into words. Whatever this was, it wasn't meant to end at sunrise. It was a bond that would follow me long after the stars above this forest faded into daylight. The night hung in a fragile stillness as if the entire forest was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. The leader's forehead hovered close to mine, just shy of touching, and for a long heartbeat, there was nothing else. No sound, no movement, no time. The violet fire flickered in slow waves, casting their light on the faces around me, painting them in soft gold and shadow. The women of the tribe stood like carved figures of something sacred, their eyes glowing with quiet certainty. The moment didn't feel forced. It felt like a tide I had already stepped into, and now there was no going back. The leader finally leaned in, the soft warmth of her forehead pressing gently against mine. The touch was simple, but the weight behind it was immense. It wasn't a gesture of ownership. It was a seal, an acceptance, something ancient and unspoken that made the ground beneath us seem to breathe. Her fingers tightened just slightly around mine, and the glowing patterns surrounding us pulsed like living veins in the earth. The forest shifted in response, the leaves overhead shimmering as though the stars themselves had descended to watch. A shiver ran through me, not from fear, but from the raw certainty of it all. I hadn't chosen this moment. This moment had chosen me. The women began to hum again, but this time it was softer, slower, almost tender. Their voices rose and fell in unison, blending with the faint whispers of wind that had finally returned to the forest. One by one, they stepped closer, forming that familiar circle around us. But this time it wasn't a cage. It was a shield. They weren't keeping me inside, they were keeping the world out. A few reached out their hands, their fingertips grazing my skin in quiet reverence. It felt less like they were touching me and more like they were leaving something of themselves behind, a thread of their world tied to mine. Their leader didn't break her gaze. Her eyes were a storm and a calm sea at once, carrying the weight of a story far older than my own. The glowing symbols beneath our feet began to sink back into the moss, disappearing like ripples fading on still water. The violet flames steadied, their wild dancing quieting into a calm, steady glow. The night itself seemed to soften, its sharp edges melting into something warmer, slower. I felt my heartbeat slow to match the rhythm of the forest. Even the air tasted different, thick with the scent of alien blossoms, earth, and the faint trace of smoke. They had pulled me into something that wasn't meant to be understood with logic. It lived in feeling, in quiet breaths, in the weight of a shared gaze. The leader finally spoke, her voice a whisper in her language, and though I couldn't understand the words, the meaning struck deep. She wasn't asking me to become one of them. She was telling me that I already was. Around us, the other women lowered their heads slightly, their hands pressed against their chests in a gesture that felt both like respect and welcome. For the first time since the night began, I didn't feel like an outsider standing in their world. I felt like part of something larger, like my steps had been leading here long before I even knew this place existed. She let go of my hand slowly, not to release me, but to let me stand on my own. Their circle opened just enough for me to see the path back into the forest, the same path that had brought me here. It was there if I wanted it. I could walk away, leave this night behind, pretend it was only a strange dream beneath foreign stars. But my feet didn't move. The leader's eyes followed me, not as a captor waiting to see if I'd run, but as someone who already knew my choice before I made it. This wasn't a prison. It was a bond. One that would remain even if I walked away. The firelight cast long shadows as their leader stepped back into the circle, her hand resting lightly over her heart. The others mirrored her, their movements perfectly in sync, their gazes never wavering. I felt something settle inside me then. Not fear, not confusion, but a quiet certainty that I would never see the stars the same way again. The forest, the tribe, their voices, their light. It was all carved into me now, stitched into a part of me that no distance could erase. As the hum faded into silence, the forest exhaled, the wind finally stirring the glowing leaves. The night didn't feel cold anymore. It felt alive, and I was part of it. I took a slow breath, the scent of flowers and earth filling my lungs, and I realized that something had changed forever. They hadn't just found me in the dark. They had kept me there, not with chains, but with something far stronger. A bond written in silence, warmth, and the quiet pull of something unspoken. If you want to follow the rest of this journey, make sure to subscribe and stay with me for the next story.